My wife laughed about her affair in front of me in Japanese. She didn't know I understood every word when I married Hana. I thought I'd won the lottery. The kind of relationship people post about online with the caption, "My forever person." We met at a charity gala my company sponsored. She was this small, graceful woman with black hair that fell just below her shoulders, an artist who could turn ordinary spaces into something that felt alive. I was a 33-year-old financial analyst who'd been living a safe, structured life that suddenly felt exciting because she walked into it. She was Japanese-American, fluent in both languages, and her English carried that soft rhythm that made even insults sound poetic. She'd laugh sometimes at my clumsy attempts to pronounce Japanese words when we watched anime or ate at her favorite ramen place, and I'd laugh too, because it felt innocent. Because she was patient, and she'd correct me like a teacher coaching a child. "Don't worry," she'd say, smiling. "You'll never get the accent right." That line, "you'll never get it right," stuck with me for years. I'd actually studied Japanese in high school. I wasn't fluent, but I understood a lot more than I ever let on. I'd tell people I'd forgotten everything after graduation. Partly because I didn't want to look like one of those weebs who learned a language for anime, and partly because Hana liked being the one who knew things I didn't. It made her feel special, I think. It didn't matter at first, until it did. 3 years into our marriage, we started talking about having kids. She hesitated at first, said she wanted to get her art career stable before motherhood. But after months of trying, we finally got that little plus sign on the test. I'd never seen her cry so hard. She threw her arms around me and whispered, "We did it." That was the happiest I'd ever been. Her mother, Emiko, flew in from San Francisco 2 weeks later.
She hadn't been to our place since the wedding, and she carried this old-school kind of formality with her. Bows, polite smiles, constant tidying even when there was nothing to clean.
I liked her, at least at first. She and Hana slipped into Japanese constantly. That didn't bother me. It was comforting even, the way their voices danced through the house like music. But one evening, while I was assembling the crib, I heard something that made my stomach twist. They were in the kitchen. I could hear their voices through the vent. "Matt knows?" Emiko asked in Japanese. My hand froze on the screwdriver. "No," Hana said quickly. "He thinks it's his." "You're sure?" "Of course I'm sure. He's too dumb to notice." Then they laughed. I remember every detail of that moment. The screwdriver slipping from my fingers, the sound of it clanging against the floor. The way my vision went fuzzy at the edges, I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The baby kicking in her stomach upstairs suddenly didn't feel like ours. The next words that floated down through that vent burned into my brain. "He'll make a good father," Emiko said. "Even if it's not his blood." "I know," Hana replied. "That's why I chose him." I nearly dropped to my knees. Here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't hit like a punch. It's quieter, slower. It's like someone turning the air down a degree at a time until you realize you're freezing. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't even move for 10 minutes. I just sat there, screwdriver in hand, listening to the sound of their laughter echoing through the vents like ghosts. When she came upstairs later, she kissed my forehead and asked how the crib was coming. I smiled, actually smiled, and said it was perfect, and that's when the plan began forming in my head. If she thought I was stupid, I'd let her think it. If she wanted to play games in Japanese, I'd become fluent in silence, because I wasn't going to blow up right away. No, I was going to document everything. Over the next week, I played the role of doting husband. I read baby name books in the living room, asked her opinion on paint colors, and left my laptop open to budget spreadsheets labeled Baby Fund. Every night, she'd talk to her mom in Japanese, and every night, I'd quietly take notes. It was almost easy for her because she thought I was oblivious. They'd joke about my white man cluelessness, laughing at how hard I worked to support their baby, not mine. The thing about pretending not to understand a language is that it becomes addictive. You start noticing everything. Subtle tone changes, pauses, words that carry double meanings, like the day she mentioned Matt again. "He texted?" her mother asked. "He wanted to know how far along I am," Hana replied. "You didn't tell him it's his, did you?" "Of course not. He's just nervous." "He should be." "He's not cut out to be a father. That's why I'm with Ryan. Ryan. That's me." The reason I was in her life, apparently, was because Matt wasn't responsible enough. I wanted to scream. Break something. Throw that crib through the window. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled when she came upstairs. That night, I sat on the back porch and stared at the stars until my neck hurt. I thought about every conversation we'd ever had about trust, about honesty, about love. I thought about how she cried when she told me she was pregnant, and realized now that those weren't tears of joy. They were relief. Relief that her lie had worked. I spent the next day at work researching family law in our state, paternity tests, prenatal DNA, financial responsibility, legal grounds for fraud. It turns out that if a husband is listed on the birth certificate, he's presumed the father unless proven otherwise. Which means if I didn't act before signing, I could be paying child support for another man's kid for 18 years. So I called a lawyer. Maria Lopez was calm, direct, and terrifying in the best way. I told her everything. The overheard conversation, the hidden language, the lies. She asked if I had any proof. I said, "Not yet." She smiled like a shark. "Then get some." That night, I ordered 2 small voice recorders from Amazon and tucked them into discreet spots around the house. One near the kitchen vent, one behind the couch. Both synced to my phone. I also downloaded an app that transcribed Japanese to English in real time. Technology's wild these days. The next evening, as Hana and her mom talked about baby showers, my phone buzzed. "He's so emotional lately," Hana said. "It's cute," her mom replied. "He cries when he sees baby clothes." Poor thing doesn't know. I looked at the waveform on my phone. The voice recognition app picked up every word. Proof. For the next month, I built a case. Recordings, translations, bank statements. Copies of her text messages from the shared iCloud. I even contacted Matt. He looked like a frat boy who'd aged out of his prime, all backward caps and half-finished tattoos. When I told him who I was, his face went white. "She told me she was divorced," he said. Of course she did. He admitted they'd been sleeping together for about a year. When she found out she was pregnant, she'd asked him to help her out financially. He'd given her $5,000 to make it go away, only she didn't. She'd decided to keep it and pin the fatherhood on me. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with an affair. I was dealing with a con artist. The night before her mother flew home, they had one last big talk. They didn't know I was in the basement, watching the live transcript on my phone. "He'll take care of everything," Hana said. "Good. Make sure you act surprised when he proposes the savings account." "I will. He's been looking up baby insurance plans. You're lucky he's sentimental. Luck had nothing to do with it." That was it. The mask came off. The next morning, I smiled, kissed her goodbye, and told her I had an early meeting. Instead, I met Maria at her office with a folder full of recordings, transcripts, and photos. She looked through everything, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "We'll handle this quietly. Don't confront her yet. Let's make sure you're legally safe first." That's when she explained something that changed everything. If I confronted Hana before taking legal steps, she could manipulate the situation, file first, claim emotional abuse, even try to cut me off from my assets. I needed to be strategic. So I waited. 2 weeks later, Maria had arranged a prenatal DNA test. I told Hana my doctor wanted some blood work for genetic screening. She didn't question it. She was too busy planning the baby shower. While she decorated the nursery with pastel clouds, I was sitting in a clinic waiting room, watching the nurse draw blood from my arm and thinking about how quiet betrayal is. The results came back 7 days later. Percent probability of paternity. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I invited her parents over for dinner, made steaks, opened wine, played the perfect husband one last time. When her father was helping me clean up, her mother asked something in Japanese that made my blood boil. "Will he still pay for the hospital?" "Of course," Hana said. "He loves me." I walked back into the room, smiling, and said in flawless Japanese, "No, not anymore." The silence that followed was the most satisfying sound I've ever heard. Her chopsticks clattered onto the table. Her mother's mouth fell open. Hana stammered, You speak Japanese?" I nodded, fluently. "I always have." Then I slid a folder across the table. DNA results, transcripts, recordings. Her father looked at me, then at her. "Hana, what is this?" She started to cry. "It's not what it looks like." Her mother tried to speak, but I held up a hand. "It's exactly what it looks like." When I left that house, I didn't slam the door, didn't yell, didn't even look back. I walked out with my head high, my case airtight, and my heart cold. Because when you've been betrayed in a language you weren't supposed to understand, the best revenge isn't anger, it's clarity. And I had plenty of that. The next morning, I woke up in my hotel room with the strangest sense of calm I'd ever felt. No tears, no shaking, just stillness. Like I'd finally stepped off a treadmill that had been running for years. The previous night replayed in flashes. The look on Hana's face when I spoke Japanese, her mother's stunned silence, her father's trembling hands as he read the DNA report. I'd imagined that moment 1,000 different ways, me shouting, her crying, the whole thing ending in chaos. But the real thing was quieter, more final, and somehow, that silence was worse. I'd packed my clothes, laptop, and essentials the night before, booking a room at a Marriott on the edge of town under a different credit card. Maria had advised me not to go home or sleep under the same roof as Hannah once the confrontation happened. She'd said, "You're emotionally safe when you're physically distant. Don't give her another chance to twist the story." She was right. I brewed the complimentary hotel coffee and opened my laptop. There were already 15 unread messages from Hannah and 5 from her mother, all in Japanese. I read the first few lines of the most recent one. "Please come back, we can fix this. I panicked. I didn't know what to do." Then, "You're being cruel. I'm carrying your child." That one made me laugh bitterly. I closed the email tab. Maria had told me not to respond to anything, not to texts, not to calls, not even to her family. Every message was potential evidence now, and I was done feeding her lies with attention. I met Maria at her office at 9 a.m. sharp. She had that lawyerly calm that felt like a lifeline in a storm. Her desk was stacked with folders, and when I sat down, she slid one across to me. "Here's where we stand," she said, flipping open a legal pad. "You have proof of infidelity, deception, and paternity fraud. The DNA test is concrete. The recordings, while not necessarily admissible depending on state privacy laws, can guide us in building a clean case." She looked up. "Do you want to go nuclear, or do you want a clean exit?" I didn't answer right away. Nuclear meant public exposure, family humiliation, maybe even social media leaks. Clean exit meant quiet filings, legal separation, no online drama. I thought about her father, Robert, the only person in that entire family who didn't deserve this. "Clean," I said finally, "but I want protection. I don't want her taking a dime she doesn't deserve." Maria nodded approvingly. "Good. That'll play better in court anyway." She outlined the steps. Step 1, file for legal separation immediately. Step 2, freeze half of the joint assets. Step 3, request a court-ordered DNA verification for documentation. Step 4, file for divorce on grounds of fraud once we had acknowledgement. She looked me in the eye. Once we serve her, she'll panic, expect emotional manipulation, maybe even threats. "Don't respond. Let me handle everything." I signed the documents. My hand didn't even shake. That night, my phone lit up at 1:37 a.m. Hannah. Again, then her father's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Robert's voice was low, broken. "Ryan, I just wanted to say I'm sorry." He sounded empty. "She admitted it," he said. "Everything. She's ashamed. I don't know where we went wrong." I swallowed hard. "You didn't do anything wrong, Robert. She says she made a mistake, that she thought she could fix it before you found out." "She didn't make a mistake," I said quietly. "She made a plan." He sighed. "I believe you. I want you to know you're still family to me. Whatever happens with them." That nearly broke me, because in the middle of this mess, he was the only person who treated me like a human being. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." 2 days later, Hannah was served at her mother's house. Maria texted me a photo from the process server, Hannah standing at the door, face pale, papers in hand. Underneath the image, Maria had written, "Consider it officially begun." I stared at the photo for a long time. She looked small, fragile, the kind of person who could cry her way into anyone's sympathy, but I wasn't anyone anymore. The next few weeks were chaos. She filed a counterclaim accusing me of emotional cruelty and abandonment. Her lawyer, a slick guy named Pierce, tried to argue that I'd been controlling and invasive. Maria handled it with surgical precision. She presented financial records showing her sudden job resignation, the large withdrawals to her mother's account, and the prenatal DNA results. Pierce's confidence deflated like a balloon. The judge reviewed everything quietly. Then he asked, "Is there any dispute over the paternity results?" Pierce hesitated. Hannah whispered something to him, eyes glassy with tears. He stood and said, "No, Your Honor. That was it. The official acknowledgement. The court entered it into record. I was not the biological father." The next step was asset division. Maria had predicted this would be Hannah's battleground. The money. She wanted spousal support, claimed she'd sacrificed her career for our family, claimed emotional damages. Maria didn't even flinch. She pulled out the printout of Hannah's email to her boss. The one where she'd resigned in a rage, calling her coworkers idiots and her manager a sexist pig. The judge skimmed it, sighed, and said flatly, "Request denied." It was like watching a professional boxer dismantle an amateur. Every argument Hannah's lawyer made, Maria countered with evidence. Every plea for sympathy got buried under receipts, timestamps, and transcripts. By the end of the hearing, Hannah looked drained, her face streaked with tears. The judge's final ruling was short and devastating. No spousal support, equal split of remaining marital assets after reimbursement of the funds she'd secretly transferred. Paternity disestablished, custody not applicable. It was everything I'd hoped for, and somehow it still didn't feel like victory. When I walked out of the courthouse, the sunlight felt strange, too bright, too clean. I stood on the steps for a long time, watching people go about their lives, couples holding hands, parents with strollers, all the things I thought I'd have by now. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Robert. "She's moving back to San Francisco, said she wants to start over. I'm sorry again, son." I typed back, "Don't apologize for her choices. You did right by me." He replied with a simple, "Take care of yourself, Ryan." I turned off my phone and sat on a bench near the courthouse for almost an hour. Because even though I'd won legally, emotionally I'd lost everything. Not just a marriage, but the illusion that love, if given honestly, could protect you from betrayal. Maria called later that evening. "Congratulations," she said gently. "You're officially free." "Yeah," I said. "It doesn't feel that way yet." "It will," she promised. "Freedom always feels heavy at first." That line stuck with me. Because that night, sitting alone in my hotel room, I realized what she meant. Freedom isn't light. It's not fireworks and champagne. It's silence after years of noise. It's sleeping without checking your partner's phone. It's making breakfast for one and realizing you can breathe again. A month later, I moved into a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom, decent view, close to work. I bought new furniture piece by piece, cheap but mine. Hannah tried to contact me twice through Robert. Both times I declined. I didn't need closure. I'd already gotten it the night I spoke Japanese at that dinner table and watched her world collapse. That was the moment I reclaimed my power. And every quiet morning since then, every sunrise where I wake up without dread, feels like justice. Not revenge, just balance restored. Because when someone builds a life on lies, the only thing you have to do to destroy it is tell the truth. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I thought the story was over. But betrayal doesn't end cleanly. It echoes. It lingers in strange places. Bank statements, phone calls, little shadows that keep reminding you that what you had was never what you thought. I was back at work full-time, keeping my head down, rebuilding savings, trying to piece together something resembling normal. Most people at the office didn't know the details. They just knew I'd been through a rough divorce. That phrase was like an emotional bandage, vague enough to cover the wound, useless for healing it. I'd started therapy at Maria's suggestion once a week with a counselor named Devora. She was in her 50s, direct but kind, and she never let me hide behind sarcasm or cynicism. She'd ask questions that dug under the skin. Do you miss her, or do you miss who you thought she was? Are you angry that she lied, or angry that you believed her? I'd leave those sessions drained, but lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't pretending. Still, some nights I'd wake up sweating, hearing their laughter in my head. The laughter from that night in the kitchen when they joked about me being too dumb to know the baby wasn't mine. It was like a recording looped into my subconscious, reminding me of just how naive I'd been. One morning in February, I got an email from an unfamiliar address. Subject line, "You should know the truth about Matt." I almost deleted it. Spam, I thought. But the preview text stopped me cold. "He doesn't think you know he's been trying to find you." I clicked. The email was from a woman named Erin. She said she was Matt's ex-girlfriend, recent ex, apparently, and that Matt had been telling stories about a married woman named Hannah who'd used him for money and lied about everything. She wrote, "I found some of her messages on his old phone. She told him she was divorcing you, that you were abusive, that the baby was yours, but you'd ruin her life if she left. He believed her. I think you deserve to know that he wasn't part of the plan the way you think." My hands were shaking before I finished reading. She'd attached screenshots, text threads in Japanese and English, photos of Hannah, messages dated months before she got pregnant. In one of them, Hannah wrote, "He doesn't understand me the way you do. He's nice but boring. I want passion. And later, if I get pregnant, it'll be a blessing. He'll never leave me. Then, to Matt, I'll tell him it's his. He'll never question it. My stomach twisted. I'd suspected manipulation before, but this was something worse. She'd built a story for both of us, a performance with 2 audiences and 2 scripts. To me, she was the loving wife. To Matt, she was the trapped woman planning her escape. And to both of us, she was a liar. I called Maria immediately. She listened quietly as I read her the email and described the attachments. Then she asked for a copy. This could matter, she said. Depending on what she told him, we might have leverage if she tries anything else, financially or legally. It shows intent. Intent. That word stuck in my mind, because that's what made her different from someone who simply made a mistake. Hannah didn't trip into infidelity. She planned it, calculated it, lived it. Maria warned me not to contact Aaron directly, said we should confirm her identity first. But curiosity got the better of me. I replied with a thank you and a question. Why send this to me now? Her reply came within an hour. Because she lied to both of you, and he's not taking it well. 2 nights later, I got another email. This one from Matt himself. I didn't know she was married when it started. She told me you'd left her. She said the baby was yours and that you were abusive. I swear I never would have. I didn't reply right away. He sent another one. I found out the truth after the baby was born. Her mom called me. I didn't even know she kept it. I feel sick. He offered to meet, to apologize in person. I almost said no. I didn't want to see his face, didn't want to relive any of it. But a part of me, the same part that wanted to understand why Hannah had done what she did, needed closure. So I agreed. We met at a cafe downtown. He looked nervous, hair shorter than before, dressed like he'd aged a decade since the photos I'd seen. He kept looking around, like expecting me to punch him. Thanks for meeting me, he said quietly. I nodded. Talk, he exhaled. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. I didn't know. She told me stories, crazy ones, said you were controlling, that you didn't let her work, that you'd threatened her. She made me feel like I was saving her. She's good at that, I said flatly. He rubbed the back of his neck. When she got pregnant, she told me she was ending it with you. Then she ghosted me for weeks. I only found out about the baby from her mom. She wanted money, said it was for hospital bills. I gave it to her, but then she disappeared again. I watched him closely. He wasn't faking it. His guilt was real. I don't hate you, I said finally. You got conned just like I did. Difference is, I married her. He laughed weakly, then stopped when he saw my face. We talked for an hour. He told me she'd reached out again after the divorce, wanted closure, said she missed him, hinted at rekindling things. He didn't respond. She's dangerous, he said. You think she's done with you, but she's not. She can't stand losing control. When I left that cafe, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not pity, just understanding. Hannah didn't love anyone. She loved being the one pulling strings. A week later, I got a voicemail from Robert. She's moving again, he said. San Francisco didn't work out. She's talking about going overseas, Japan maybe. I just thought you should know. I thanked him for the update, even though I didn't need it. She could move to the ends of the earth. It didn't change anything. But part of me wondered what she'd tell the next guy. Would she say her ex-husband was cruel? That she'd been the victim? That the baby's father had abandoned her? It didn't matter. Not really. Because for once, I wasn't part of her story anymore. That night, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker. I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the lawyers, the recordings. It all felt like someone else's life. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Do you ever think about what we could have had if you just trusted me? No name. But I didn't need one. Hannah. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Trust isn't given. It's earned. You burned it. Then I blocked the number. Therapy helped. Slowly. I started dating again. Not seriously, just coffee, conversation, seeing what normal felt like. I learned to enjoy small things again. Cooking for myself, going to the gym, walking through the park without feeling like I was escaping something. One evening after a session, Devora said something that stuck with me. You can't unlearn betrayal, she said, but you can learn not to make it your identity. I realized that was exactly what I'd been doing, defining myself by what had been done to me instead of who I was becoming after it. The last email I ever got from Hannah came on a Sunday in early summer. I saw you moved on. I'm happy for you. I hope you're not angry anymore. I really did love you. I didn't reply. Because she wasn't looking for forgiveness, she was looking for attention, and I wasn't giving her any more of that. Sometimes I still think about that night in the kitchen. The laughter, the language, the moment I realized my life wasn't what I thought. It's strange how something that shattered you can eventually feel like liberation. Because if she hadn't laughed in Japanese that night, I might still be living a lie. I might still be the fool building a crib for another man's child. Now, when I hear someone speaking Japanese in public, I don't flinch. I smile. Because understanding the language that destroyed my marriage also gave me the tools to rebuild my life. It taught me patience, strategy, and most importantly, silence. Because sometimes silence is the loudest revenge there is. A year passed. 12 long months of paperwork, healing, therapy, silence, and rebuilding. Most people think the story ends when the divorce decree is stamped, when the cheater's name is gone from the paperwork and your bank account has your name only again. But the truth is, that's when the hardest part starts, living without the anger that used to power you. I'd gotten used to being defined by that betrayal. It had become my anchor, my origin story, the guy whose wife cheated on him and didn't know he spoke Japanese. It was a viral, perfect little tragedy people could gossip about, marvel at, pity. But once it was over, really over, I didn't know who I was anymore. I moved into a new apartment with pale gray walls and no history, no faint smell of her perfume, no furniture we'd picked out together. Just me, my coffee mug, my quiet mornings, my schedule. My therapist, Devora, called it redefining self through solitude. I called it learning not to panic when the silence gets too loud. At first, I couldn't stand it. The stillness reminded me of those nights I'd sat awake, listening to Hana whisper to her mother through the vents. It made my skin crawl. So I started filling the silence. I joined a kickboxing gym. I volunteered on weekends. I even signed up for a community college Japanese class. Not because I needed it, but because reclaiming the language felt like taking back a weapon that had once been used against me. The teacher, Yuko, was maybe in her early 40s, sharp, funny, patient. When I told her I'd once been fluent, she smiled knowingly and said, "Then you remember more than you think. You just buried it." That line hit harder than I expected, because that's exactly what I'd done with everything. My hobbies, my confidence, even my identity. I'd buried all of it under someone else's approval. By the end of the semester, I was speaking comfortably again, this time without shame. Yuko asked if I wanted to help tutor beginners. I said yes. It was the first yes I'd given the world that wasn't about survival. Work got better too. My boss, Marcus, had quietly known more about my situation than I thought. One day he called me into his office and said, "You've been through hell, man, but you didn't let it ruin your work ethic. I respect that." He gave me a promotion. I didn't cry, but I wanted to. Life wasn't perfect. I still had bad days. Nights when I woke up sweating because I dreamed of that dinner table, her mother's mocking laughter, the way Hana's chopsticks clattered when I spoke Japanese. But now I had tools. Therapy, discipline, structure. I'd stopped chasing closure from her and started chasing growth for me. Then one afternoon I got an email from Robert, Hana's father. "Ryan, I know I have no right to ask, but could we meet for coffee? There's something you should know." I almost ignored it. But Robert had always been decent. He'd been betrayed too. So I said yes. We met at a diner halfway between our cities. He looked older, hair grayer, shoulders slumped, but his eyes were kind. He started with small talk, then sighed and said, "She's in Japan. Kyoto, I think. She called me last week." My stomach tightened. "She's remarried." I nodded. "Good for her." "No, it's not good." He told me her new husband was a wealthy businessman she'd met through her cousin. She'd told him the same story she'd told Matt, that I was cruel, controlling, the villain in her narrative. But this time, she'd done something new. She'd used my name to apply for a credit card before she left the country. I felt my pulse jump. "You're sure?" He slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a letter from a debt collection agency. The account was in my name, but the charges were in Japan. Thousands of dollars. "She must have opened it while you were still married," Robert said quietly. I didn't know until the bills started coming here. For a moment, the world tilted. A whole year later, and she was still finding ways to reach into my life. The next morning I called Maria. She wasn't surprised. "This happens more often than you think," she said. Identity and credit theft after a messy divorce isn't rare, especially if they had access to your social security number while married. She told me exactly what to do. File a police report, freeze my credit, dispute the charges with documentation of the divorce decree. She also told me to get a new passport just in case. When I hung up, I laughed. Not from humor, but disbelief. Even across an ocean, Hana was still trying to control me. But here's the thing she didn't understand. That kind of chaos only works on someone still afraid of it. I wasn't. I followed Maria's advice to the letter. Within 2 months, the fraudulent debt was cleared, my credit secured, my accounts locked tighter than a bank vault. It cost time, money, and patience. But I treated it like a final exorcism. Every signature, every notarized form, every recorded phone call with a bank representative felt like driving another nail into the coffin of what she'd done. I refused to let her ghost live rent-free in my financial future. By summer, I'd started seeing someone new. Her name was Lauren, a photographer who'd moved from Chicago. We met at a community event, bonded over bad coffee and good sarcasm. I didn't tell her the whole story at first, just that I'd been through a complicated divorce. But one night, when we were sitting on my balcony watching the rain, she asked why I kept flinching when my phone buzzed. So I told her. Everything, from the Japanese conversations to the DNA test to the fraudulent credit card. She listened quietly, no pity, no judgment. When I finished, she reached over, rested her hand on mine, and said, "She broke you, but you rebuilt yourself better." Something in me cracked open, because no one had ever said that before. Not, "You'll find someone else." Not, "You'll move on." Just acknowledgement that rebuilding wasn't about finding someone new. It was about becoming someone new. 2 months later, we took a trip to Seattle, the city where Hana's mother had once lived. It wasn't intentional at first, but being there felt like closing a circle. We walked through Pike Place Market, and for the first time in years, I didn't flinch when I heard Japanese tourists chatting nearby. I even turned to one of them when they asked for directions and answered, fluently. Lauren looked at me, surprised. "You're good," she said. "Yeah," I smiled. Took me long enough to admit it. On our last night in the city, I checked my email before bed. There was one unread message, no subject line, no name, just, "I saw your photos. You look happy. I hope she treats you better." No signature, but I didn't need one. It was Hana. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, or even satisfaction. Just peace. Because the woman who'd once thought she controlled every narrative had just proven she didn't anymore. She was watching from afar while I lived freely, and that was punishment enough. I deleted the message without replying. Then I turned off the phone, kissed Lauren goodnight, and fell asleep without dreams. The past doesn't vanish. It lingers like smoke. But I'd learned how to breathe through it. And when you finally stop choking on someone else's lies, the air tastes better than anything you've ever known. The fall air had that sharp bite to it, the kind that makes you feel awake, clean, and somehow renewed. It had been over a year and a half since everything imploded, and my life, for the first time in forever, wasn't built on reaction. It was built on rhythm. Wake up at 6, run 2 miles, shower, coffee, work. Evenings with Lauren, weekends volunteering, therapy on Thursdays. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was stable. And after everything I'd been through, stability felt like luxury. But as it turns out, life doesn't stop testing you just because you've already passed one exam. It started small, a blocked number calling once a week. No voicemail, just silence. Then came the letters, plain white envelopes, no return address, all postmarked from California. Inside were handwritten notes in messy cursive, some in English, some in Japanese. "Do you still think about me? You'll never love anyone like you loved me. She'll never understand you the way I did. And finally, the baby deserves to know his real father." That one made my blood run cold, because I knew it wasn't true. Biologically, legally, morally, but the words cut deep anyway. I called Maria. She told me to keep everything. No responses, no confrontations. If she's escalating, we build a record, but we do not engage. Lauren noticed my tension before I even told her. I tried to downplay it, but she was too perceptive. "Is it her?" she asked one night, eyes flicking to the stack of envelopes on my desk. "Yeah," I admitted. Lauren's jaw tightened. Do you want me to help you report it? I shook my head. Not yet. She wants a reaction. She doesn't get one. It was the truth. But deep down, I felt something between fear and rage. Because I'd worked so hard to move on, to build peace, and Hannah was still finding ways to reach across states and scratch at the surface of my calm. 2 weeks later, she went digital. A Reddit post started circulating in local subs under the title, "My abusive ex-husband is spreading lies about me. Should I go public?" The account was new, anonymous. But the details were unmistakable. She described me without naming me. She said I'd isolated her, recorded her conversations, stolen her child. It was masterfully manipulative, just vague enough to seem plausible, just emotional enough to attract sympathy. Comments poured in. You're brave for speaking out. He sounds like a narcissist. Protect your baby. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, watching hundreds of strangers defend the woman who'd mocked me in a language she thought I didn't understand. Lauren came up behind me, reading over my shoulder. She's trying to rewrite history, she said quietly. Yeah, I murmured, and the internet loves a sob story. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to Maria. She called within the hour. First off, breathe, she said. Defamation cases are tricky, but if this continues, we'll handle it. Can we stop her? I asked. Eventually, but don't post, don't reply, don't feed it, let her dig her hole. That became my mantra again, the same one that had saved me once before. Let the liar dig their own grave. Still, the damage gnawed at me. The idea that somewhere out there people believed I was a monster while she got to play the victim. It triggered something old. That helpless feeling of being blindsided, betrayed, humiliated. So, I started documenting everything again. Emails, letters, social media posts. I built another digital folder, this time titled Closure 2. And I told myself this wasn't about revenge, it was about protection. Weeks passed, and the noise began to die down. The Reddit post got buried under newer dramas. Hannah stopped sending letters. The block number went silent. For the first time in months, I exhaled, without feeling like I was waiting for another shoe to drop. But then, in mid-November, Robert called. She's back in the States, he said quietly. She's saying she wants to make peace. I didn't say anything for a long time. Do you think she'll try to contact me? I finally asked. He sighed. She already did. She asked if I'd tell you to meet her. Said she has something important to say. What did you tell her? I told her you'd moved on, and that if she really cared about peace, she'd leave you alone. My throat tightened. Thank you, Robert. He hesitated. Ryan, she's not well. She's unraveling. You did the right thing leaving. I knew he was right, but guilt still flickered somewhere deep inside. Not for leaving her, but for ever loving someone capable of this kind of destruction. The holidays came. Lauren and I went to Colorado to visit her family. Snow, fireplaces, laughter, all those cliché postcard things that somehow felt real again. We built gingerbread houses with her nieces. I caught her smiling at me, and for a second, I saw what peace actually looked like. Not perfection, not forgetting, but choosing joy even when you remember the pain. One night, while we were sitting by the fire, she said, You know what I admire about you? You didn't let her turn you bitter. I laughed softly. I was bitter for a while. Yeah, she said, leaning her head against my shoulder. But you didn't stay there. That's what matters. When we flew home in January, there was one final envelope waiting in my mailbox. No return address, postmarked from Japan. Inside, just one sentence, written in perfect, careful English. Thank you for loving me, even if I didn't deserve it. I stared at it for a long time. Not angry, not sad, just done. I put it back in the envelope, slid it into my Closure 2 folder, and locked it in my desk drawer. Then I went to bed next to Lauren, the first woman I'd ever loved without fear, and slept peacefully until morning. Because here's the thing I learned through all of this. You don't win against a liar by proving them wrong. You win by living a life they can't touch anymore. And I had finally done that. Spring came early that year. The city thawed slowly, and for the first time in what felt like years, I felt like I was thawing with it. The shadows that had followed me for so long, The distrust, the bitterness, the resentment had finally begun to fade, not disappear, just soften. One morning, I woke up before dawn. The sky outside was a soft blue-gray, the kind of color that makes the world feel half-finished. I brewed coffee, opened the balcony door, and listened to the city wake up. Birds, distant traffic, laughter from a jogger down below, life moving forward. Lauren was still asleep. Her hair spilled over the pillow, her breathing slow and steady. I stood there for a while, watching her, realizing something simple and profound. This was peace, not the loud, cinematic kind people write songs about, the quiet kind, the kind you earn, one painful step at a time. 3 months later, Maria called to tell me that the last of the fraudulent accounts had been fully resolved. "It's official," she said. "You're clear. She can't touch a single thing that's yours." I laughed. "Feels like we've been working toward this for a decade." Maria smiled through the phone. "You've done good, Ryan. You took a nightmare and turned it into a clean slate." When we hung up, I sat there for a long time, holding my phone, thinking about everything that had happened. The lies, the discovery, the court, the sleepless nights, the letters, the damn Reddit post. Every twist and turn of it felt like another life. A version of me that had died and been rebuilt piece by piece. That night, I opened my storage unit for the first time in almost 2 years. It still smelled faintly of cardboard and dust. There were boxes labeled photos, letters, legal, evidence, and one small box I hadn't opened since the day I packed it. The one labeled Hannah. Inside was the last physical remnant of that life, our wedding photo. The two of us smiling under the cherry blossoms, the world still believing our story was real. I stared at it for a while. The man in that photo looked so hopeful, so certain, so naive. I didn't hate him. He had no idea what was coming, no idea how much strength he'd have to find. And maybe that's the point. You can't appreciate who you've become without mourning who you used to be. So I didn't rip the photo. I didn't burn it. I just placed it back in the box, sealed it, and wrote one word across the top. Finished. Then I locked the unit and walked away. Lauren and I moved in together that summer. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet decision that made sense. We found a small townhouse with tall windows and a lemon tree in the backyard. We split chores, argued over furniture, laughed about our bad cooking experiments. It was normal. Beautifully, wonderfully normal. Sometimes I'd catch myself bracing for something. A fight, a lie, a betrayal that never came. She'd notice, smile softly and say, "You're safe here." And every time, I believed her a little more. In July, Robert called again. His voice was weaker now, slower. "I just wanted to tell you," he said. "She reached out last week. She's in therapy, real therapy this time. She said she's trying to make peace with her past." I didn't say anything for a moment. "Do you believe her?" He sighed. "I don't know, but I'm choosing to hope. She's still my daughter." I understood that. Family doesn't stop being family just because they break your heart. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "And thank you for always being honest." He chuckled. Guess we both learned the value of that the hard way. When we hung up, I felt something surprising. Not anger, not sadness, just forgiveness. Not for her, for me, because carrying hatred was just another way of staying connected to her, and I was done being tethered. A year later, I stood in front of a class of adult students at the community college, teaching conversational Japanese. It felt surreal. The same language that had once exposed betrayal was now my bridge to new beginnings. At the end of class, one of my students asked why I decided to teach. I smiled. Because learning a language teaches you how to listen, and sometimes listening saves your life. They laughed politely, not knowing how literal that was, but I meant it. Life kept moving. Seasons changed. I got older. Sometimes I'd still get a stray email from someone asking, "Hey, are you the guy from that Reddit story?" I'd laugh and ignore it, because that wasn't my story anymore. That was something that happened to me, not who I was. Lauren and I got engaged quietly. No grand proposal, no audience, no theatrics. Just a morning on that same balcony, the city waking below us, and me saying, "You make life peaceful again." She smiled, eyes wet, and said, "Let's keep it that way." On our wedding day, I kept one promise to myself. No lies. Not even small ones. We wrote our own vows. Mine were simple. I spent years learning how dangerous secrets can be. So I promise you this. No more pretending, no more silence, no more half-truths. Just honesty, even when it hurts. She smiled through tears. Then we'll always be safe. Years from now, maybe I'll forget the exact dates. When she cheated, when I confronted her, when the DNA test came in. But I'll never forget the lesson, that sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you is also the thing that sets you free. That truth isn't always gentle, but it's always cleansing. That speaking a language, any language, isn't just about understanding others. It's about learning to hear yourself again after years of silence. I still think about Hannah sometimes. Not with anger, not with longing, just with perspective. I hope she found what she was searching for. I hope she learned how to stop breaking things that love her. And if she ever truly healed, I hope she forgave herself. Because I already have. Not for her sake, for mine. So here's what I'd tell anyone standing where I once stood, holding shattered trust in their hands and wondering if life can ever be okay again. Yes, it can. It won't be the same, but it can be better. Because when the storm finally clears, you realize something incredible. You were never broken. You were reforged. And that new version of you, he doesn't just survive, he thrives. The end.